He must be removed before the council meets.
The Emperor suspects nothing.
Picture this, it's the late 5th century BC, and the Greek world is literally tearing itself apart. We're deep into the Peloponnesian War, this brutal, decades-long slugfest between Athens and Sparta. And right in the middle of all this chaos, at the very center of the storm, stands one man. His name is Alcibiades. He's a brilliant general, a dazzling speaker, a student of Socrates, and a guy with just intoxicating charisma. To the people of Athens, he was their golden son, like he was forged by the gods for greatness. But his story, well, it's not some simple tale of heroism. No, it's this dizzying epic of ambition, betrayal, and this tempestuous, toxic relationship with the city he said he loved, a city he would both save and come very, very close to destroying. Now, to really understand this guy, we can't start at the beginning. No, that would be too easy. We've got to begin at the absolute height of his infamy, because to get a handle on the life of Alcibiades, you have to wrestle with one single, shocking question. How did Athens' most gifted and promising leader become its most notorious traitor? How did he become a man who would willingly offer his genius to every single one of his city's mortal enemies? You know the great comic playwright Aristophanes? He absolutely nailed the paradox of Alcibiades with this line. The relationship between Athens and Alcibiades was basically a toxic love affair. The city was completely captivated by him, his style, his sharp mind, his bold vision. But at the same time, it was disgusted by his incredible arrogance and his dangerous, reckless behavior. Athens just couldn't live peacefully with him, but as they were about to find out, it seemed like they couldn't win the war without him either. This one line pretty much frames the entire tragedy of his life. Okay, so just look at this timeline. What's really incredible is the sheer audacity of it all. This wasn't some single desperate act of treason. This was a pattern. In 415 BC, he flees to Sparta, the sworn enemy of Athens for generations. Then, just 3 years later, after he wears out his welcome there, he defects to the Persian Empire, the colossal power that all of Greece had once united to fight off. And then, and this is a truly breathtaking twist, he starts working against the Persians to get himself recalled to Athens. The man was a political chameleon, just changing his colors to survive. And in the process, he dragged out the war and threw the entire Greek world into chaos. So to even begin to understand how a man could betray his home so completely, we have to hit rewind. We need to look at the man Athens itself created, the golden sun that the city showered with adoration, long before he became its most infamous turncoat. I mean, Alcibiades was, for all intents and purposes, an Athenian prince. He was born into the highest level of the aristocracy. When he was orphaned, who takes him in? None other than Pericles, the great statesman, the architect of Athens' golden age. On top of that, he was famously good-looking, which, you have to remember, the ancient Greeks saw as a sign of divine favor. He had a brilliant mind, trained by Socrates himself, and a way with words that could twist the entire democratic assembly around his little finger. But underneath all of those gifts was this burning, all-consuming ambition, what the Greeks called philotemia, a love of honor that, for Alcibiades, turned into an insatiable hunger for glory, for power, and for the spotlight. And this little anecdote, it just perfectly captures the darker side of his personality. So the story goes, he had this magnificent dog, just beautiful. And one day, for no good reason, he cuts off its gorgeous tail. When his friends were, horrified, he just laughed it off. He said that as long as the Athenians were talking about his dog's tail, they wouldn't be saying something worse about him. See, he craved the spotlight, no matter what it took to get it. He didn't care if the attention was for a huge victory or a shocking scandal, just as long as everyone in Athens was talking about Alcibiades. It was a huge red flag for the dangerous arrogance that would come to define him. In politics, the man was a force of nature. He shot up the ranks to become a general, or strategos, and he became the voice of this new, aggressive generation that thought the peace with Sparta was frankly boring. His main political rival was this older, more cautious statesman named Nicias, who had actually negotiated that peace. Well, Alcibiades saw caution as weakness. He actively worked to undermine Nicias, pushing for bigger, grander military campaigns. And it was his ambition that would soon push Athens toward its most daring and ultimately its most disastrous military gamble, the Sicilian Expedition. All right, so every great tragedy has that one moment, right? That single point where everything goes wrong and the path to ruin is locked in. For Alcibiades, that moment came in 415 BC. It was on the very eve of launching the biggest military campaign Athens had ever dreamed of. And a bizarre, shocking scandal was about to shatter his career and set him on the path of treason for good. So to really get why this was such a huge deal, you first have to understand what the Hermai were. These weren't just statues you'd walk past. No, they were sacred. They were these stone markers representing the god Hermes, protector of travelers and trade. They stood at crossroads and outside people's front doors all over the city. They were this constant, visible part of the city's religious life, a symbol of divine protection and civic order. And then you have the Eleusinian mysteries. Now, these were some of the most sacred and secret religious rituals in the entire Greek world. They were held to honor the goddesses Demeter and Persephone, and the whole point was that if you were initiated, you were promised a better afterlife. Their secrets were guarded like nothing else. To mock them or reveal their secrets in public, that was an act of profound sacrilege. It was a crime that terrified the deeply religious people of Athens. Okay, so let's break down exactly how this whole thing went down. Alcibiades has this massive fleet ready to sail for Sicily. Then, one morning, Athens wakes up to this horrifying sight. Almost all of the Hermai in the city have been vandalized, systematically defaced overnight. Panic just grips the city. Everyone sees it as a terrible omen for the expedition. Rumors start flying, and who gets blamed? Alcibiades, of course, with his reputation for wild, impious parties. He's accused not just of mutilating the statues, but of staging a drunken parody of the holy Eleusinian mysteries. His political enemies, they seize the moment. They cleverly argue to let him sail first, only to recall him for trial later, knowing he'd be an easier target if he wasn't there to defend himself. So when the summons reaches him in Sicily, Alcibiades knows what's up. He's facing a rigged trial and a death sentence. So he makes his choice. He becomes a fugitive and sails not for Athens, but for Sparta. So now he's in exile, right? Condemned to death by his own city. But does he just go hide somewhere? No way. He unleashes his incredible talents in service of the enemy, and the consequences for the home he left behind are absolutely devastating. And here's the thing, the advice he gave them was absolutely brilliant and utterly catastrophic for Athens. He went to the Spartans and basically revealed Athens' entire game plan. He told them to build a permanent fort at a place called Decelia, just miles outside Athens. This move cut the city off from its farmland and its crucial silver mines, slowly choking its economy. He also convinced them to send a top-notch general to Syracuse, which directly led to the complete and total annihilation of that massive Athenian invasion force. Later, when he was in Persia, he played this masterful double game, advising them to just bleed both Athens and Sparta dry, weakening both sides for Persia's benefit. His goal was always the same: make himself indispensable no matter who he was working for. But even while he was proving how valuable he was, that personal recklessness of his, it was always his fatal flaw. While in Sparta, he starts this notorious affair with Timonea, the wife of one of the Spartan kings, King Agis. When she gives birth to a son, a rumor Alcibiades himself supposedly started, was that he was the father. I mean, the arrogance is just off the charts. This naturally made him a mortal enemy of one of the most powerful men in Sparta. Fearing for his life, he had to flee again, this time to Persia, starting the next chapter of his wild life as an exile. You'd think the story ends there, right? A disgraced traitor on the run. Not even close. This next chapter, it might just be the most incredible part of his entire life. After betraying Athens, helping Sparta, and advising Persia, Alcibiades somehow engineers a return to power that is nothing short of stunning. By 411 BC, Athens is a mess. It's on the verge of collapse. The Sicilian Expedition was a total disaster, and democracy itself had been overthrown. In this moment of desperation, the Athenian fleet, stationed out at Samos, which was acting like its own little rogue state, did the unthinkable. They were called their greatest traitor. They gambled everything on the idea that only Alcibiades could save them. And, for a while, he proved them right. Once he was reinstated as general, he led the navy to this string of incredible victories, which all culminated in the complete destruction of the Spartan fleet at Cyzicus in 410 BC. The traitor had come back as a savior. So he comes back to Athens in 407 BC, and it's this huge, triumphant return. The old charges are dropped, his property is restored, and he's made supreme commander with absolute authority. But, and you knew there was a but coming, Athens' trust was paper thin. In 406 BC, while he was away raising money, a subordinate he'd left in charge engaged the Spartan fleet against his direct orders and lost a minor battle at Notium. It was a small setback, but it was all the excuse his enemies needed. In the chaos of the Athenian assembly, they pounced, blamed him for the defeat, and just like that, the fickle democracy stripped him of his command. And just like that, it was over. Betrayed again by the city he had just rescued, Alcibiades went into a final exile, this time to a private castle he owned in Thrace. His turbulent, crazy relationship with Athens was finally finished. He tried one last time, right before the final catastrophic naval battle of the war. He rode down to the Athenian camp and warned the generals they were in a vulnerable spot. They just laughed him off, and the entire fleet was destroyed. The city he could never fully commit to, and the city that could never fully trust him, was now beyond his reach forever. So after all that, how are we supposed to make sense of a guy like this? A patriot who becomes a traitor? A military genius who is his own worst enemy? For more than 2,000 years now, historians and philosophers have been debating the legacy of this brilliant, flawed, and completely unique person. Even back then, people were completely divided on him. The great historian Thucydides, who was an exiled general himself, saw him as this man of immense talent whose fatal flaw was a selfish ambition that just couldn't exist within a democracy. The Roman biographer Plutarch, writing centuries later, was just fascinated by him, his charisma, his vices, and he painted him as this flawed genius whose personal failings led to his own downfall and Athens as well. Modern historians, they often see him as the ultimate political opportunist, a master strategist whose actions, all driven by personal survival and ambition, ultimately served no one and just brought more chaos to an already shattered world. So in the end, it all comes down to this one huge question. Was Alcibiades just this uniquely flawed individual, a man whose boundless arrogance was always destined to cause destruction wherever he went? Or was he the perfect, tragic reflection of the Athens of his time? Brilliant, ambitious, overconfident, and in the end, totally self-destructive. Maybe the real tragedy of Alcibiades is that he and his city were just so much alike. And in the end, maybe they deserved each other.